Welcome to a new daily top AskReddit video. Today's topic:
what are some events in recorded history that are extremely hard to believe? The story of Desmond Doss, if you've seen Hacksaw Ridge, that tells it, but they tell the watered-down version for the movie because they didn't think anyone would believe it with all the full details. The basics of the story are basically he was left behind on a cliff with a lot of men who were wounded when the US had to pull out in WWII. He then single-handedly carried 75 men off that cliff and lowered them down to men below to be rescued. He was the first conscientious objector to win the Medal of Honor for what he did. But he was also malnourished because of his religious beliefs. He couldn't eat some of the food he was given, so he's this very thin guy managing to lift and carry 75 men in one night and then lower them down a cliff. And the movie showed the next day he knocked away a grenade and was injured. But he was more injured than they showed, with 17 pieces of shrapnel in his body, and he literally got off the stretcher when waiting to be brought down for someone more injured than he was. And was providing medical care to that guy as he had been blasted. Even crazier, some of the Japanese soldiers in the battle claimed to have had him in their sights multiple times, and every time they tried to shoot him the gun jammed. Check out the 2004 documentary, The Conscientious Objector. Yeah, that's true. I think I remember them saying they thought about including that in the movie, but it felt too unbelievable since he had some pretty crazy times where guns jammed or everyone missed him. I was on a surgery rotation when I watched this movie. It is the third day, and we were in office. No patients in the afternoon, so the surgeon asked if I'd watch a movie with him. I said sure. Hacksaw Ridge. The man started sobbing, shoulders heaving, sobbing. I pat him on the back, not really sure what to do here. As my 3 days of interactions with him had been full of him being a condescending, arrogant, insulting asshole. I messaged the student who was with him prior. I just go, Hacksaw Ridge. She responded, did he break down? So it seems every 6 weeks this man watches Hacksaw Ridge and just sobs. I hated that guy. Good movie though. Oh hey, I know that tactic. You keep all of your emotions bottled up to keep working and be coherent, and then deliberately do something to unleash them and break down. You cry hysterically, feel better, and can go back to blocking everything for a while. Yeah. Never would do such an unhealthy thing. Nope. Never. In 1920, President Paul Deschanel of France fell through the window of the train while traveling on the Orient Express. He stumbled up to the nearest signal box in his pajamas and told the signalman that he needed help and that he was the President of France. The signalman reportedly replied, "And I'm Napoleon Bonaparte." Was he really Napoleon Bonaparte? Don't end the story with a cliffhanger. The suspense is building. For example, Halley's Comet appeared in the sky when Mark Twain was born in 1835. The comet moves in a 75 or 76-year orbit, and, as it neared Earth once again, Twain said, "I came in with Halley's Comet and I expect to go out with it." Sure enough, he died on April 21, 1910, just as the comet made its next pass within sight of Earth. Yeah, when I hear stuff like that I question a lot of things. To be fair, the amount of people on this planet make coincidences like this very reasonable. Edit. Some research into this quote seems like it's not entirely true that he said this. He also had a sad later life and was in poor health, knowing that he would pass shortly anyhow. If he said it, it was said the year before his death. So even if he said it, it was more like he's saying, "I'm going to die soon," and/or, "I want to die soon, I expect to go out with it." He also died a whole month before the comet passed by Earth anyhow. Removed. In the same vein, Romania played in the first ever World Cup held in Uruguay in 1930. They traveled by ship and they had a makeshift pitch on the bridge to train, but they lost all their footballs at sea in 2 days. Oh, and Egypt couldn't get to the tournament in time because they missed their boat. Skill issue. The Great Arizona Irahan Abduction. Basically, Catholic nuns brought Irish orphans to Arizona to put them in good upstanding Catholic families. Most of the Catholic families in Arizona were Mexican. White people see white children being placed in Mexican households, so they form a vigilante group to kidnap the children. It was a giant fustercluck. It's like, hey, only we can do that. Just to follow on, those babies would have been taken from their mothers, unmarried women, in mother and baby homes in Ireland that were run by the Catholic Church. https://en.m.wikipediaorg/wiki/magdalene_laundries_in_Ireland. The Archduke's car stalling right in front of his would-be assassin having a sandwich. Dude wasn't even trying to kill him anymore, it was just a right place right time coincidence. It was obviously a Nexus event. A time traveler went back to stop it from happening, and time made sure it happened anyway. A fixed point in time. And this was the beginning of World War I. And it happened 110 years ago today. TBF, a fart by the wrong person would have started WW1 at the time. Everyone was on edge. 4 seasons total landscaping. This brings me so much joy, thanks for the reminder. My brain can never properly file this in the real thing that happened category and not satire. It was like something straight out of Arrested Development. Chef's kiss. For modern American political history, this probably takes the cake. As a non-American, that's the second most surreal American news I ever seen. My uncle Curtis was blown up in his tank in WW2. The medics dragged him from the tank, drugged him, dug a trench and buried him alive. Then later, when the battle had moved on, they came back and dug him up. He was severely injured, but he recovered, and he is still alive today, and Morgan Freeman did a TV show with him. Salute 761st.
https://www.al.com/live/2012/09/in_war_underscore we_all-black_specials/761st-talendash-the-original-black-panthers. WTF, this is insane. Never heard this story and I'm from Alabama. Thanks for sharing. Abraham Lincoln's eldest son was saved from death, or at least serious injury, on a train platform by a famous actor named Booth. Roughly a year Booth's brother John Wilkes Booth would go on to assassinate Abraham Lincoln. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Robert_Todd_Lincoln. I know the focus is on Lincoln because he was the one killed, but I recently learned it was a whole ass conspiracy. My lunch break is over, but I remember Seward was stalked and they planned to kill him too. I teed there was a third, but I can't look it up right now. The VP at the time, Andrew Johnson, and Seward's face was slashed while he was recovering from a carriage accident. It said that the metal contraption he was wearing to fix his jaw prevented the knife from doing more damage. The VP was not killed as the man who was supposed never bought into killing people, he just wanted to kidnap them. It was actually devastating for the South, who had recently lost the Civil War, as Lincoln was very sympathetic to allowing the South to thrive with compassion and their struggles and become one country. Which I think is a lesson that wasn't taken with Russia, but was with Germany and Japan. There is also the fact that Robert Todd Lincoln just could not avoid presidential assassinations for the life of him. He was at the White House when his father, President Lincoln, was shot at Ford's Theater and was with his parents throughout the night after the shooting. He was at the train station when President Garfield was shot on the railway platform. He was at the fair where President McKinley was shot. While not in the same building as the president, Lincoln was standing just outside that building on the fairgrounds. Dude is the Jessica Fletcher of presidents. The raising of Chicago sounds completely made up. In the 1850s, Chicago kept flooding, so they went around block by block and lifted the entire city by approximately 6 to 14 feet using nothing but human-powered jack screws. Streets were filled in and raised to meet the new elevation. A handful of buildings didn't get raised, and now have the ground floor on what was once the second floor. Pullman, the railcar company, got their start in this industry, and only shifted to railcar manufacturing once they ran out of buildings to raise. Everyone talks about the 1800s engineering insanity of reversing the river so that it flowed into the Mississippi instead of Lake Michigan, but the raising is rarely mentioned, I think because it's so unbelievable. Everyone talks about the 1800s engineering insanity of reversing the river so that it flowed into the Mississippi instead of Lake Michigan, but the raising is rarely mentioned, I think because it's so unbelievable. Till the late 1800s were fucking madness. It was just a combination of modernish technology and absolutely zero environmental or labor laws. Every city was out completely transforming the environment around them with reckless abandon. Standing water, yes, but not really flooding. It was a sewage issue. The standing water was nasty and contaminated from sewage and had no way to drain from the city. The city was the same level as the lake, so underground sewage wouldn't work as it would just fill from the lake. So the ambitious plan to lift Chicago up out of the swamp was hatched. It was absolutely a fascinating thing. Hundreds of screws under a building being hand cranked together to lift up the building under the watch of the responsible engineers. During the First World War, the German ship Cap Trafalgar was made to look like a British ship, the HMS Carmania, with the goal to lure British ships in close before attacking them. The first ship, the HMS Carmania, ran into was the actual HMS Carmania. The real HMS Carmania was damaged, but the Cap Trafalgar was sunk. The Spider-Man pointing meme IRL. This is where the phrase, "that's Cap," comes from. Napoleon coming back from exile and the soldiers sent to stop him joined him instead. Yeah, Napoleon was a wild one. Someone should make a not totally shit movie about his life. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Soldiers, bro. Napoleon, bros. Lost to History was the most epic beer bash before the 100 Days started. When Abraham Lincoln was still a state legislator in Illinois, he got into a public feud with a rival politician named James Shields that culminated in Shields challenging Lincoln to a duel. As the challenged party, Lincoln was given the choice of weapons for the duel. Shields assumed he would choose pistols. Lincoln chose broadswords. When they arrived at the duel site and were getting ready, Lincoln demonstrated his significant height and reach advantage over Shields by swinging his sword over his head and cutting a tree branch clean off. Shields then realized he'd made a huge mistake and immediately conceded. Reminds me of Bismarck challenging another German to a duel. The German chose sausages, and said only one had gone bad and Bismarck could choose which of the two he would eat. Otto then declined. He didn't just challenge any German, he challenged Rudolf Virchow, known as the father of modern pathology, and the man who first managed to isolate the pathogen Trichinella spiralis, which is often found in undercooked pork. I'd have declined that duel too. Also, cheated a bit on this story, which is of course how I know about it equals P.